Welcome to the Department of Real Estate update. We're excited to have a couple people here to tell us all the things we're doing right and all the things we're doing wrong. I just want to introduce the two people that will be speaking to us today. We are joined this morning by two senior executives from the state's Department of Real Estate. Jeff Oboyski is the Assistant Commissioner of Licensing, and Chika Sunquist is the Assistant Commissioner of Enforcement. So be careful what you say to her. That enforcement thing is kind of... Anyway, Jeff began his career with the Department of Real Estate in 2005, starting as a Deputy Commissioner in the department's Los Angeles District Office. He later transferred to Sacramento, where he served as Senior Deputy Commissioner of the Legislative and Public Information Section. On January 2019, Jeff was promoted to Assistant Commissioner of Enforcement, leading the department's enforcement unit. This past July, he was appointed the Assistant Commissioner of Licensing. In that position, he is responsible for the department's licensing, examination, and education programs. I bet you that's been a trip for you this last few months, Jeff. He was succeeded as enforcement chief this fall by Chika Sunquist. Chika has been with the Department of Real Estate since 2006, working her way up the ladder from an investigator in the Sacramento Enforcement Office to their mortgage loan activities unit, where she later served as supervising special investigator. In her new role, Chika is responsible for the overall management and operation for the department's enforcement program, including mortgage loan activities and the Enforcement Support Operations Office. Earlier in her career, Chika sold real estate as a salesperson and currently holds a broker's license, which is on a government service status. Thank you both, Jeff and Chika, for joining us this morning. Don't know who's going to talk first and who's going to talk last, but we will turn the time over to you.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, Terry and Sylvia. Thank you for reaching out, and thank you, the Southwest Riverside County Association of Realtors, for setting aside some time today for allowing us to tell you some of the things that we're seeing on our end and some of the ways that we've addressed these challenges presented by COVID. But I want to first make sure that we underscore, and this is how I begin all of my presentations, in that public protection is the Department of Real Estate's highest priority. That is what the real estate law provides, and that is the foundation for many of the decisions that we make in Sacramento as it relates to licensure, regulation, education, and enforcement. And that is part of our mission statement. Now, the Department of Real Estate has five office locations throughout California. We're obviously up here in Sacramento, we're in Oakland, we're in Fresno, we're in Los Angeles, and we're in San Diego. And we also have 5 testing centers throughout the state, here in Sacramento, Oakland, Fresno, La Palma, which serves our Los Angeles County area, and in San Diego. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our workload. It's how I begin every one of my days. I look at the stats and making sure that we're processing applications timely. And what you see in front of you is a comparison workload from fiscal year 1920 and comparing it to the prior fiscal year of 1819. Now, everyone on this call knows that COVID is obviously presented a number of challenges for all of us, including us obviously here at the department. And as you can see, our exams scheduled were down 18% for salespersons and 15% for broker licensees or examinees when compared to the same period from the last fiscal year. And that in part, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, was because we had to close down our exam centers from mid-March through May due to COVID. So obviously that impacted the number of exams we were able to schedule last fiscal year. Also, new licenses issued. We were down 26% on the salesperson side and down 15% on the broker side. So again, we took a little bit of a hit. However, there is some good news. If you look at the renewal numbers, very, very comparable to the prior fiscal year. 79% of our salespeople renewed their license last fiscal year as compared to 80% the prior fiscal year, and 92% of brokers renewed compared to 93% the prior fiscal year. So that's a very healthy renewal rate. And when it was all said and done, we were down about 1%. Our licensee population was down 1% from the prior fiscal year, which everything that we've been dealing with isn't that bad at all. Now, I want to take a moment just to kind of show you a snapshot of the breakdown by month for fiscal year 1920. As you can see, in July, we started at about 424,000 licensees, just a little bit over. And for the next few months, we were gaining about 300-400 licensees per month. And you can kind of see it top out around 425, and then it gets to, well, then it gets to 426,000 licensees. And all of a sudden in March, you start seeing the decline. And that was when the governor announced the emergency order due to COVID. So you start seeing the numbers decline at the end of the fiscal year. But again, we were only down about 2,500 licensees from July to the end of June. So, you know, we've been weathering it pretty well in that regard. Statewide, we have 421,000 licensees, 642,000 licensees in the breakdown. That includes brokers, salespeople, and officer licenses. And in Riverside County, 27,356 licensees, 20,689 are salespersons, 5,474 are licensed brokers, and 1,193 are officers. And officers are those that are involved with the licensed corporation issued by the department. So every corporation that's active has to have a licensed officer. Now, every few years, we do an exam study to make sure that we are accurately testing for the knowledge, the basic knowledge that's required for an individual to engage in licensed activity in California. And one of the changes that we adopted, or recommendations we adopted that became effective on January 27th of this year, was to reduce the amount of time that examinees have to take the broker and the salesperson exam. The broker exam was reduced from 5 hours to 4 hours, and the salesperson exam was reduced from 3 hours and 15 minutes to 3 hours. Now, those of you who are brokers on the call today know that when you took the broker exam, more than likely you took it at the 5 hour period, and there were intermissions in between at the 2.5 hour mark. Well, by cutting it down to 4 hours, we no longer have that intermission or that particular break. So what we've done now is we have been able to offer 2 broker exams a day now that they're down to 4 hours. So that's been very helpful as we navigate through some of the restrictions that we've dealt with offering the exam, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But I do want to emphasize exam content, number of questions, and the pass rates still remain the same. So how has COVID impacted the Department of Real Estate, specifically as it relates to our exams? As I mentioned before, our exams were canceled due to the fact that we had to close our exam centers for 2 months, mid-March through the end of May. And obviously that created quite a bit of backlog for us, for those folks who were waiting to take the exam. Currently we're open, and our exam centers are open in all 5 office locations, but we're open at only 50% capacity due to social requirements, social distance requirements, and also health and safety requirements. And we also require that examinees, both examinees and proctoring staff, wear masks in our exam centers. And I do want to point out that our exam centers are disinfected after every exam. One thing that we've done to address the backlog is we are now offering exams on Saturdays in both La Palma and Sacramento, and those are 2 of our largest exam centers. Now, this is, one area where I definitely want to underscore and point out to all of you. It's been very challenging for us, given the backlog and trying to get folks who are eligible to take the exam into the exam. And we're trying to get through this backlog, but I'm very proud of my team in the exam section here in Sacramento, because as you look at the chart in front of you, we're actually doing more exam administrations. That means we're actually offering more exams than we did from the prior 2 years for the same month. So if you look at July, July 2018, we had 161 exam administrations. 2019, we did 144. And in 2020, we did 178. And then you see that number go up to 182. We dropped down a bit in September, 174. But the last 4 months, we did the most in October at 190. So I can tell you that we are trying to do our very best to cut into this backlog by making more exams available to eligible examinees. Now, the governor, as you all may know, has issued a number of orders, executive orders, they refer to them as. And there were 4 orders that impacted DRE examinees, applicants, and licensees. And the most recent order was signed at the end of October. And the order number was N as in Nancy 8320. I want to take a moment to kind of talk to you about how this particular order impacts our examinees, licensees, and applicants. So example 1, as all you know, a real estate license is active for 4 years and you renew it every 4 years. Well, if your expiration date, let me also mention this, the most important date to remember, there's 2 dates I want you to focus on: April 16th, 2020 and June 30th, 2021, because these orders impact the expiration dates that occur on or after April 16th, 2020. So if your license expired on March 21st, 2020, that's before the April 16th, 2020 date. So you would not be eligible for an extension under the governor's order to renew your license. However, if your license expired on April 9th, 2020, after the April 16th date, you would be granted an extension to submit your renewal application, fee, and CE requirements until June 30th, 2021. I want to point out 2 things. 1, there's nothing preventing you from renewing early. And 2, you can still conduct activity. Even if your license has technically expired on August 9th, you can still conduct license activity all the way up until 6/30 before you actually submit and renew your license. Now, the 2-year grace period. Every license is issued on a 4-year term, and then pursuant to the real estate law, you have 2 years on a late basis that you can renew your license after your license expires. So again, if your 2-year license expiration date expired on February 21st, 2020, that's before the April 16th date. So you would not be eligible for an extension. However, if your license expires or your 2-year license expiration date expires on July 1st, 2020, that's after the April 16th date, you would be granted an extension to submit your renewal application, late fee, and CE requirements until June 30th, 2021. I do want to point out though, because this is in the late period, it means your license is already, your 4-year term is already expired. So therefore, if you're in this category, you cannot conduct any license activity while you're in this late period. The third example is when you apply to take the real estate exam, you have 2 years to take and pass that exam. So again, if your 2-year period expired on February 1st, 2020, you would not be eligible for an extension, so you would have to reapply to take the exam. However, if your 2-year expiration date expired on April 21st, that's after the April 16th date, you would be granted an extension to take and pass the real estate exam until June 30th, 2021. And finally, once you pass the exam, you have 1 year to apply for your license. So if that 1-year period expired on April 2nd, 2020, you would not have an extension to apply for your license. You would have to actually retake the exam. However, if your 1-year expiration date to apply for the license occurred on February 19th, 2021, you would be given an extension or granted an extension to apply for your license until June 30th, 2021. So I'm going to turn it over to Chika Sunquist, our Chief of Enforcement, to cover some of the things that she's seeing on her end. She has some interesting stories to tell you, and then I'll come back to you in a few minutes.
Thank you, Jeff. So under the real estate law, or I'm sorry, under the Department of Real Estate, we have the ability to enforce and investigate violations of the real estate law and the Subdivided Lands Act. And in terms of our investigations, they may be against those who hold real estate licenses or those who don't hold a real estate license but are performing activities that require a license. And then also we perform background investigations against real estate license applicants. In terms of the disciplinary action or regulatory action we can take against licensees, it's on a scaled basis. So for relatively minor and technical violations of the real estate law, we'll try and take an educational and compliance approach by issuing a citation with a fine. And the maximum fine amount that we can issue is $2,500 per investigation. For more egregious violations, then we may pursue more formal discipline, which can start with a public reproval, which is like a formal announcement that we found a violation of the law. And then it could move towards a suspension of a license, a restriction of a license, or finally a revocation of a license. Against a licensee, we can also issue a desist and refrain order, which is an order that requires the person receiving that order to stop the violation of the real estate law immediately. And finally, for the most egregious violations where we find most consumer harm, for example, we may pursue a bar order against somebody, which would bar somebody from working in the real estate industry or a related industry for a period of up to 3 years. For unlicensed persons, we still have the ability to take and pursue regulatory action. And we do issue and can issue citations and fines to unlicensed persons. But with an unlicensed person, we can issue a $2,500 fine per act that we find. So for example, if we find an unlicensed person is operating a property management company, then we can issue a $2,500 fine per act, meaning if they solicit 100 clients and we find those and pursue violations there. If they collect rent, if they're performing services, we can look at $2,500 per act that's found, which can amount to substantial fines. And so we want to have an impact on unlicensed persons to let them know that they cannot be doing licensed activities without the benefit of a license that have been earned by people such as yourselves. You've earned the license, so you shouldn't be competing against people who are unlicensed. Additionally, we can issue a desist and refrain order, which is again that formal stop order from violating the real estate law. And then again, for the most egregious cases, we will pursue a bar order. When it comes to our license applicants, obviously we have the ability to deny a license, but we also want to look at someone's rehabilitation. And so if we find somebody has rehabilitated themselves enough from whatever the background issue is, but maybe isn't ready necessarily for a clear license, then we can also issue and offer a restricted license. And then sometimes with applicants, they are very eager to enter the industry and will start acting as a licensee without the benefit of their license. So we may pursue a desist and refrain order to make sure that they're not performing activities without the benefit of the license. And again, for the most egregious cases, we may issue a bar order. In terms of the most common violations that we see, number one is mostly trust fund mishandling, I'll say. And these are typically related to any act surrounding collecting a client's trust funds. Unfortunately, we do find conversion cases where a licensee is taking a client's funds, and rather than holding on to them as they should, they will take those funds and use them for personal use, which is obviously a violation of the law. Secondly, we do see a fair amount of brokers who don't have proper accounting records. So the real estate law has very specific requirements for maintaining proper trust fund records. And so lack of proper accounting records is something that we find on a fairly regular basis for brokers that handle trust funds. And finally, with trust fund handling, we do find brokers that unfortunately are short their trust funds that they should have. Some of the issues have to do with conversion, and some of them have to do with, bank errors or errors in moving around funds. But we do find that trust fund shortages do occur. We also find, in terms of a common violation, brokers are failing to supervise their affiliated licensees or their employees. And this could range from a broker that is a rent-a-broker, and they have a company where they're being paid a fee per transaction, and they're not actually supervising the activities of the office. Failure to supervise could also include where a broker doesn't have any policies or procedures in place to monitor what's happening in the office, and they don't have any systems in place to make sure that those policies and procedures are being followed. So both of those are examples of failure to supervise. We also see our fair share of unlicensed activity, and obviously that's mainly by those who are performing acts without a real estate license. But that also could include brokers or salespersons who are paying compensation to people who are performing unlicensed activity. A broad violation that we see, we call it misrepresentation, but this could take several different forms as well. Misrepresentation could include making a substantial misrepresentation through some sort of statement. For example, saying that a property has cleared pest when really that agent has information that there is a significant termite problem. Another example of misrepresentation could be failing to disclose a material fact to a client, and we would also deem that misrepresentation through omission. And finally, a common violation that we see is related to advertising. An advertising violation could be something where there's a false or deceptive statement that's made outright, or it could be something that is misleading. And so because we see our fair share of advertising related violations, I would encourage you to take a look at the advertising guidelines that we've put together this year. And it includes, examples of bad advertising that we see, and it also includes all of the disclosure requirements that licensees should have within their advertising. And sorry, I should say that that advertising guideline is available on our website, on Department of Real Estate's website. What we're doing now with the enforcement program is we are still continuing to do our quote unquote field work and by performing our proactive broker office surveys. And a lot of that is being done virtually. So we are contacting brokers and doing our broker office surveys by phone or through, online virtual meetings. And we are doing our disciplinary action follow-up, meaning if we issue a desist and refrain order to an unlicensed person, or if we've revoked a license, we want to make sure that that person is not in the industry anymore and not continuing to violate the real estate law. We are also making sure that we have updated tools and references for our licensees. All of those are available on our website. And I think the best materials that we have for broker licensees are our broker compliance manuals and our broker self-evaluation checklists. And we do update those regularly based on new regulation or new statutes, new real estate law. We are also still performing our outreach to consumer groups and industry groups, albeit through new means, through virtual means. And we are still participating in our law enforcement and industry task forces. And we also have our complaint resolution program. And for those that aren't familiar with the program, it is a program that started several years ago. And we found that we were receiving a lot of consumer complaints that were related to just a lack of communication between a licensee or a broker and a consumer. And so we created this program to help facilitate communication, to maybe resolve any consumer issues or concerns before it became a formal investigation. And we found this program to be very successful. And in the last fiscal year, I believe we handled about 130 complaint resolution program matters that were resolved so that we didn't have to initiate a formal investigation. All right, this next part is hopefully a little more entertaining. And I'd like to bring up a couple of cases within the enforcement program that were worthy of DRE press releases. So I think they're worthy of bringing up here. The first case that we had involved a DRE broker named Mr. George Chang. And Mr. Chang was a real estate consultant to a developer, and he was involved in a pay-to-play corruption probe at Los Angeles City Hall. And he was involved in a criminal enterprise that involved a Los Angeles City Council member and staff members at the Los Angeles City. And there was a scheme where, he was involved in bribing the LA officials to gain favor for the developer. And so Mr. Chang has pled guilty to a federal RICO charge, a racketeer-induced and corrupt organizations charge. And we have, at the Department of Real Estate, suspended his Department of Real Estate license, so he cannot currently work. And we are waiting his sentencing so we can take further action against his real estate license. And Mr. Chang is scheduled for sentencing February of next year. Another case I'd like to discuss with you is Ms. Laura Preciado. She was involved in a fraud scheme where she would put listings up saying that these were her listings. She was the agent representing the sellers, where she actually never got permission from the sellers to list those properties, and she didn't have listing agreements. And she would solicit buyers for those properties. Again, where she didn't have the authority to sell that property. And she would encourage the buyers to give her an earnest money deposit paid out to her unlicensed escrow company. And she wouldn't place those funds into a trust account, and instead ended up taking those monies and converting them to personal use. If a client asked for money back, then she would use the new money she got from a new buyer, and pay back the other person, like a Ponzi scheme. Between January 2016 and January 2018, we found that she had collected over $1 million in consumer and buyer deposits from at least 158 buyers on just 23 properties. So effective February of this year, we have revoked Ms. Preciado's license as a broker, and there are currently 3 active Orange County Superior Court criminal cases where she is facing 21 felony grand theft charges, which include felony enhancements for aggravated white collar crimes, and for felony enhancements for secondary offenses committed while released from custody. So she was arrested, released from custody, and continued with her scheme. And Ms. Preciado's next court appearance is scheduled for January of next year. As licensees, there is an issue that I'd like to make sure that everyone's aware of on this in this meeting, and that is that we occasionally receive information that a licensee's identity has been stolen as a licensee. So we are finding, unfortunately, that unlicensed persons are taking over a licensee's identity and performing activities under a legitimate license when that person doesn't actually hold a license. So I would ask you to make sure that you are protecting your hard-earned licenses from fraud. So you can do that by going to our website periodically, looking yourself up on our license lookup information, and making sure that all of your information is correct and accurate. You can also perform Google searches, internet searches on yourself, and making sure that the advertisements that you see, the social media posts that you see are actually approved by you and that they are yours. So again, please make sure that you are protecting your own license from fraud. And let's see, finally, we do have a lot of great information on our website, and I would encourage you to check out our social media pages. We have a Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, and we do, again, have a lot of online information. Again, check your licenses, get updates on regulations and laws. For those of you that are hiring new licensees, get more information about our exams and how to get a license. And again, we are updating our publications on a regular basis. So take a look at our updated forms and publications. Make sure you're following us on our real estate bulletins. And then our online complaint system. There are 369 DRE employees, and as Jeff mentioned, there are 421,000 licensees. And so although we do our best to be proactive in finding issues or searching for unlicensed activity, having boots on the ground. Unfortunately, we're not out there. We can't police every single person that's out there. And so I implore you and I ask you to let us know if you see any new scams or frauds, or if you hear about unlicensed activity, please let us know. File a complaint. The fastest and easiest way to get us that information is through the online complaint system. I believe it was Terry that mentioned that I might be addressing things you're doing wrong, but for those of you on this call, you are the ones that are probably doing things right because you're taking an active interest in making sure you're being compliant and that you're protecting your clients. So I appreciate the work that you're doing in that way, and we are looking forward to increased engagement with our industry partners. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Well, thank you, Chika, for that information. I'm sure everybody appreciates that. And there's just a couple more things that I want to talk about before we open it up for questions. Clearly this is a time where we are relying on technology more than ever before. And I can tell you that there's many benefits to using our e-licensing system, including not having to wait for mail time, processing timeframes. Obviously, we've seen those increase a bit over the last few months. I encourage you to take a look at the items on the screen in front of you. Those are all the transactions that you can conduct through our e-licensing program, our e-licensing system, which is located on our website. I also want to let all of you know that as we move forward, we're going to try to embrace technology. So I encourage you to go on to e-licensing and make sure your email address is updated. That's the way we want to communicate with you. And like I said, as we move forward, we're going to try to do more communications through email. So please make sure your email address is up to date. As all of you know, we receive many phone calls here at the department. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And clearly our time frames, our hold times can be excessive. And one thing that we try to do is always identify ways to improve our communication techniques. And that includes the way in which our consumers, examinees, licensees can contact us. So what we've done is we've created an email address where those folks can email the Department of Real Estate, general licensing and exam questions, and we attempt, and from what I understand, we're doing a pretty good job responding within 2 business days of getting the email into our licensing section. And right now per month, since we've started this in March, we're doing about 1,500 email responses per month. So I can tell you that, this is one way that we're trying to improve our communications with our licensees and consumers. And we do have our public phone number. Our info section is open from 8 to 5 daily, Monday through Friday. And we do about 30,000 calls per month. So that's quite a bit, considering I have about 8 to 10 folks on our phones in Sacramento. Obviously, we do, when phone calls get high, when we see increased volumes, we do ask that other staff assist with that. But we are trying to come up with other means where we can, try to get more communication through other technology and different types of programs. So 2021, obviously this has been a challenging year, but I think many of us, once we end this year, we're going to look at ways that we can improve upon what we do. One thing I'm very excited about, and this is something that the commissioner has talked to me that he wants to see done in 2021, is that we want to create a program where examinees can submit their exam and license application online and again, get away from paper. So that's something that our IT program's currently working on, and my staff is obviously offering a lot of input on that as well. I'm very excited about that. And then phase 2 of our SOPROS, which is Subdivision Online Public Report Application System. Right now, we take preliminary reports online. This would be a way for subdividers to submit final reports and also other reports associated with their subdivision. We are currently working on redesigning our website. We want to clean that up and make it more consistent with other state agencies and also more user-friendly. And finally, additional testing locations. As I've mentioned, we have 5 testing locations throughout the state. We're looking at ways that potentially we get contractors involved to have additional satellite locations throughout California where examinees could go and take the exam. So those are 4 of the items that we have on the docket for 2021. And here's our contact information. Please give us a call or send us an email. On my end, if you're having any issues with your license or know people that are having difficulties getting an exam date or there's something going on, please feel free to send me an email. And, you know, as Chika pointed out, you guys are the boots on the ground. And if there's something that you see on your end that doesn't seem right, I encourage you to email Chika, and we will certainly have investigators take a look at that. So with that, Terry, I can send it back to you and see if there's any questions, or, you know, we're available.
Thank you so much, Jeff. This is Sylvia. And we did have one question in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and read that to you. And it was referring to brokers for hire that are not doing supervision. They were asking, how is that allowed legally for them to conduct business that way?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. What I'm going to do is, actually, Chika and I are in the same office. I'm going to have her come over and respond to that as that falls under her purview, and we'll be right with you in a moment.
That's a great question. And the simple response is it's not. Brokers are required to be responsible for their office operations and for supervising, controlling, and directing the operations of the brokerage. And again, that's why I encourage, if you see a broker that is what we call a rent-a-broker, and they're not supervising the activities of their brokerage, please submit that information to us so we can take a look at how their operations are working and whether or not there are adequate supervision policies and procedures in place.
Thank you so much, Chika. That was the only question that was in the chat. I did put it out there for our members. If there's anybody else with a question, just raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute you. It looks like you answered all of their questions with your presentations. It was very valuable information, and we greatly appreciate you taking the time to join us. We have a question here from Joe McGowan. Will the history of broker affiliation be added to licensees' DRE public records? This was presented many years ago and would be a benefit to consumers.
It should be, once that law came into place, we do list on a broker's public information any salesperson that's affiliated and any broker that is affiliated as a broker associate. So if you find that one of your broker affiliates is not properly listed, then it may be that you've submitted the application for the affiliation and we haven't maybe processed it yet, or perhaps you maybe haven't submitted the paperwork for that affiliation, but that process is available. And if there's an issue with the license, then obviously please reach out to Jeff.
Thank you. Michael Percival, do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
I do, thank you. Question, NAR just recently passed an update to the Professional Standards Code of Ethics Standard of Practice 10.5, which creates additional restrictions on realtor speech in regards to items being posted on social media platforms. In the language in there, NAR has identified hate speech and hasn't defined what hate speech actually is. But there's language in there that's pretty controversial. I was in a meeting yesterday with CAR leadership and long conversations about it. But the question is that there's language in there that would refer this hate speech to the licensing agency. Seeing that NAR is a member organization and has the legal right to restrict speech, the licensing agency is a governmental agency and doesn't necessarily have that same right under the First Amendment. So there's language in there that's going to read that says that they can refer if something's found to be in violation of public trust in a code of ethics violation under this new Article 10.5. How is that going to play in as far as the DRE goes moving forward with that?
Sure, that's a great question. And to your point, I think if we were to receive some kind of complaint related to hate speech, then I'm wondering if maybe there are other issues related to that person's practices. And so from a Department of Real Estate standpoint, we have the ability to investigate discrimination related issues. And so I'm not sure we'd necessarily look at the hate speech, but we may broaden our review to see if there are any discriminatory brokerage practices. So I'm interested to look at the Code of Ethics and maybe have a broader discussion.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you. We have another question here on the chat. Any idea when we will be able to have open houses? Is this a DRE violation?
Oh, that's a great question too. And unfortunately, I have no idea. You know, we were hopeful over the summertime that things would open back up, and then obviously winter has come, and it looks like things are going in a different direction than our hopes. So I'm not sure what the plans are, and I understand that the governor may be coming out with additional information about what may be happening in the next short amount of time. And to address the second part of that, we do occasionally receive information that a broker is not necessarily following the industry guidance on COVID restrictions. And so what we do is we try to just address that as an educational opportunity to just reach out to the broker and let them know about the guidance, provide them a copy, and then make sure that you know, they understand or they're at least aware of the guidance. And we just try to share that information from an educational standpoint.
Thank you. And Jose Unive, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. The question I had, sometimes when we hire new agents, they come to our company and then we get a call from a customer because they're looking to maybe file a complaint, and they go into the DRE website and the only information they have is the current broker. And the incident many times happen before they join our company, but we have no way to track down based on a date, what company they were working for at the time of the incident, so we can refer them, as opposed to just tell the poor consumer, sorry, I don't know, they didn't work for me. It would be kind of nice of you to say, at that time, according to the DRE records, they were under this particular broker. At least we give them some guidance.
Sure. You know what, let me switch over to Jeff. Just a moment, please.
Yeah. Is that Jose?
Yes.
I think that's a great point you make. I took over in this position in July, and I'm starting to build a list of things that I want to do on my end. And I think, you know, I was thinking about, you know, maybe the last 5 years of employment history. We would include that on the public license information page on our website. So it's something that I have in my short list, and I think that might be something that works with what you're proposing.
I just think it's better for the consumer, because I feel terrible when I say, well, the good news for me, it wasn't under my watch, but right. I said, and I don't know when. So I at least can give them some point in the right direction so they feel they've been heard by someone, you know, and be able to follow up with that.
I think it's a great point, and something that, like I said, it's already something that I'm seriously putting together on my end. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. And there's just a follow-up comment from Joe. I don't know if you have access to the chat and you can see it, but if not, I can go ahead and read it to you. It says, I also want to see licensees' employment history shown on the DRE site. NMLS offers this for loan officers, and DRE should do as well. Licensees bouncing from brokerage to brokerage can be a sign of trouble, and consumers have no way of knowing they might be dealing with someone who has been problematic from previous brokers. It was just a follow-up from the conversation you were having.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. Again, that's a great point.
And it looks like that's it. If there's anybody else, please raise your hand or write on the chat. We're at 10:47. We do have a few more minutes. We have them here for an hour. But if there aren't any more questions, then I think we will adjourn the meeting. And it looks like that's it. So thank you so much, Jeff and Chika and Rick, for being here, for organizing this for our members. We greatly appreciate it. And may you all have a wonderful holiday season.
Yeah, and Sylvia, I just want to say, to Chika's point earlier, we certainly appreciate all the great work that the local associations do throughout the state. And clearly, having your folks being able to participate today to hear some of the things that we're doing, we're working on, it really helps us to connect and hear some of the issues that you're seeing on your end. And you guys can hear some of the stuff that we're doing. So I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. I wish you all the best in 2021 and just be safe, okay?
Thank you. Bye, everyone. For those joining us for the marketing meeting, we'll see you at noon.